In almost every sci-fi franchise, starships are covered in windows. But in reality, those windows would be a huge problem. Science fiction writers usually explain away the danger with energy shields, force fields, and navigational deflectors. But those are fictional solutions. In the real world, every part of the ship would have to survive years of radiation, impacts, and accumulated structural stress. Space is filled with micrometeoroids and debris moving at several kilometers per second. At those speeds, even a tiny particle can hit with the force of a bullet. And at relativistic speeds, a grain of dust could strike with explosive force. A solid hull would use several layers of armor to absorb and spread out that energy. But every window would interrupt those layers, creating an area that is more difficult to reinforce and repair. A starship's structural strength comes from internal structure. Frames, ribs, and bulkheads that carry stress around openings. That doesn't mean windows make a starship fall apart, but what they do is create weak points. And the larger the window, the greater the opening that must be reinforced. That adds more framing, more weight, and more complexity, all for a view that the crew doesn't actually need. Every window also creates seams, seals, and joints that must survive constant vibration, acceleration, and extreme temperature changes. The side facing a star could become incredibly hot, while the other side freezes. Over time, that repeated expansion and contraction could weaken the entire assembly. And because the window and the surrounding hull would be made from different materials, they would expand and contract at different rates. That would place even more stress on the seals connecting them. These starship windows wouldn't be made of glass. Even if they were made from a thick, layered, transparent composite built to handle pressure, shock, and extreme conditions, they would still be much more vulnerable than metal alloy armor. In Star Trek, starship windows are made from transparent aluminum, designed to flex rather than shatter under stress. But that does nothing to solve the problem. Every window interrupts the hull plating and design, creating seams and structural weak points. The material itself may be incredibly strong, but the frame around it, the seals holding it in place, and the connection to the hull would still have to survive every impact and sudden acceleration. A window is not just one component. It is an entire assembly, and every part of that assembly creates another possible point of failure. They would also provide significantly less protection against cosmic radiation and high-energy particles. So every window would need heavy shielding or shutters, defeating the entire reason for having windows in the first place. And radiation wouldn't just threaten the crew. Over time, it would also degrade transparent materials, clouding them, discoloring them, or making them more brittle. A window would gradually become weaker over time and less transparent. Once the shields fail, windows become the most obvious points for damage to break through. Kinetic impacts would crack or even shatter them. Energy hits would wear them down, maybe even melt them. And if one fails, you don't just get a little damage. You get an explosive decompression. That could turn loose equipment and fragments of the window itself into dangerous projectiles. Emergency doors would have to seal the compartment immediately, adding even more machinery, weight, and potential failure points. And visually, windows would offer almost nothing. At interplanetary distances, enemy ships would appear as tiny points of light, if you could see them at all. Sensors would detect danger thousands of times farther away and in every direction, including through darkness, glare, and radiation. A window only shows what happens to be directly in front of it, and limited by the failings of the human eye. A sensor network could provide a complete view around the ship, magnify distant objects, track their movement and display information that the human eye could never see. That's why a starship would never rely on windows and the human eye for visual information. It would use state-of-the-art sensors, powerful cameras, and multi-layered reinforced hulls instead. And it would project an image that looks and feels like a real window. The crew could still look out into space, but through a screen built into a solid armored wall. It would provide an even better visual experience without cutting hundreds of unnecessary holes into the structural design of the ship. Because in space, windows are about as useful as a fifth wheel on a car, and every window would significantly compromise the structural integrity of the entire starship.